welcome to My Brain is a Wonderland, a podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. Welcome back, everybody. You're here with your host, Emily, and today we are going to be talking about my complicated relationship with cars and driving. I found from just being online with other neurodivergent people and talking that driving seems to be a struggle for a lot of people. In addition, just being a passenger in a car is a nightmare for a lot of people, sensory-wise. So I'm going to go over both of those things, driving and being a passenger. If you've listened to my podcast prior, and I definitely recommend you go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes that go over my diagnosis and some of my prominent symptoms and things that might be relevant to you and relevant to my story. But I grew up in London, England. I was raised by a single mom in quite a small family. A lot of people were estranged from each other or had tenuous relationships, and we all lived in London. If you know anything about London or a city like London, for example, New York, most people there, or I don't know if it's most people actually, but no one I knew had a car. So teachers in school had cars. Some of my friends' parents had cars, but we didn't have a car. No one in my family had ever had a car, and no one in my family knew how to drive. So I didn't know how to drive. My mom never drove a car. My grandparents didn't. I don't think my dad did either. He died when I was 4 years old, so I'm not exactly sure, but I don't think anyone did. It's the public transportation system in London is the biggest in the world. So there's so many buses and trains that you can take. Not to say I didn't have sensory issues on those forms of transportation, but I didn't have to engage with cars almost ever. Maybe a taxi every once in a while or a friend's car. But when I was growing up, I always thought that I was very motion sick, which I think I do struggle with that, but I don't think it comes from the motion affecting me physically, or that thing where they say if you look at a horizon, right, it'll stop you getting sick because it's your eyes not matching what your body's doing or something. So I used to think that it was all motion sickness related, and oftentimes I could take a motion sickness pill and it would settle me down, but there would be times where a motion sickness pill wouldn't work. My sickness would override and I would still vomit, and it would happen constantly. We did go on a trip when I was in elementary school to the north of England, to Blackpool, with my mom, my cousin, and his girlfriend. She had a car, so we drove in that car, and I'll never forget it. I remember it so vividly. We pulled up to a gas station, petrol station, and they're filling up the car, and I'd never been to a gas station, right? We didn't own a car, so we didn't ever go to one, so I never smelled the smell of gas. So they're filling up the car, and the smell is just filling up the car as well. Even now, I get my husband to close the door when he's filling up the car with gas because I just cannot stand the smell. And I remember we're pulling away, and I felt so sick from this smell. And it wasn't too long after I was saying, oh, I'm sick, I feel sick, and I threw up everywhere. Just vomited all over the inside of this car. It was absolutely hilarious. My family didn't have anything to clean it up with except some cat toys in the car. So we pulled off the freeway. They're trying to clear my vomit out of the car with a tiny catnip toy, you know. I'm changing my clothes in the back with my bare butt in the window. And then a cop pulls up and says, hey, what are you doing? Can I help? So embarrassing all round. And it's always this kind of situation where we've got to pull over and I'm vomiting. Always. It's just been constant and annoying my entire life. And now that I live in the US, so I've lived in America for 15 years, and I first lived in California where there was lots of public transportation. Then I moved to Florida, lived in Oregon, and then back to Florida. Oregon had some public transportation, but still wasn't as good as California and England. And I've just had to very much get used to being in a car, or tried to get used to being in a car, and I just have not been able to until recently. So what used to happen when I'd be a passenger in a car is I'd get in the car and it'd be a mixture of, everything flying by the window, right? So when you whiz by something and you just see it's like duh, 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 right by your eye, right? That is like sensory hell to me. Then if someone has the radio on, so when me and my husband drive, he knows the radio does not go on ever. He will sometimes, if it's a long drive, about an hour or two in, if I seem okay, he'll ask me, is it okay if I put on an audiobook or turn some music up a bit? Because he's driving and wants to, stay awake and is bored and all that stuff. But I generally, we don't. I'll get into the car if he picks me up from work and he has the loud radio on and I turn it down right away. Or he'll turn it down when I get in. He knows that's just what I need. So what would happen is, those would be whizzing by, the radio would be on, and then if anyone is talking, so if my husband was talking over that, or if there was someone in the back seat talking over that, it would send me spiraling. And what would happen is I would slowly get this really weird migraine that was painful in my temples, but then it would all of a sudden just become like no pain. It would be like pain, like it was building to something, and then go like silent with a ringing in my ears. It would be like pain, boop, and then I'd vomit immediately. That's what would happen every single time. It was like my brain was just going, can't take it, doop, vomit. And once I would vomit, I would usually be okay. It would be this kind of expression of that overwhelm. And this would happen constantly. And I would think that it was motion sickness completely before, but now I realize that it's sensory overload. So the thing that has actually helped me the most, other than the usual stuff, wearing comfortable clothing. I know that now if I'm driving, I cannot dress up for an event. It's just gotta be schlubby and you get me how you get me. Things like that. Eating light before I get in the car, not eating in the car, Not drinking a lot of water before because that's sloshing around. Always have my sunglasses on because if I don't have sunglasses, I'm just gonna die. It's just awful. So there's that, but the one thing that has really radically changed my life and my experience of riding in a car is loop earplugs. This isn't an ad. They have radically changed my life. I got them a couple of months ago and I wanted to try them on a plane, and I'll do an episode about planes too because they're another whole kind of hell for me. But I got them for a work trip. I was going on a plane and thought I'll try these out, and they just changed my life on that trip. So what I do is I put them in before I get in the car because you need them. I kind of like them to go in when I'm all silent and calm before it gets too much. I don't want to get to that point. So I put them in and I get in the car. I'm on the right side of my husband because he's driving. I'll often leave both of them in if we're just chilling in the car. If he's talking, I'll take out the one that faces him so I can hear him better, right? But I have done several 2 to 6 hour trips with these earplugs now, and they drown out everything. You know that sound? You can hear it in a plane and you hear it in a car too. A lot of people I think don't notice it. But it's that sound, that loud, sound of where the rubber meets the road, where other cars are driving, where the AC on the plane's going, whatever that is, it's gone. It's just gone. And you can still hear people talking, and you can still, I'll wear them on a plane. I forgot my noise-canceling headphones last time I was on a plane, so I wore the earplugs with normal headphones over the top of those. And that was amazing, because I could still hear everything through the headphones, but it drowned out that horrible sound. So if you haven't tried loop earplugs, I absolutely recommend them. They come in different sizes. I'll just warn you about this now. I'm quite small-boned, and I take the smallest size, like extra small or extra small or something. I have, they come in, the ones you get the pads with all the different sizes. The largest size is too small for my husband's ear. So we tried them on him and his ear absorbed the earplug. They don't fit. Look into that if you can return them if they don't fit, things like that. But they have radically changed my life. So that's been my experience with being a passenger, okay? Wasn't used to it as a child, teen, growing up. Didn't know what it was like. Just didn't have any perspective on it. And whenever I would do it, it was just hell. And I have a feeling it wasn't getting used to it. That's not going to help. It just is what it is. I'm thankful I didn't have to be exposed to a bunch of cars, driving in cars when I was growing up, because being on a bus was bad enough. Sometimes that would really send me over the edge. That was my experience with being a passenger. With regards to driving, like I said, I never drove. My parents never drove. No one in my family drove a car. So when I applied for college and I lived in London, I was wanting to do at the time a degree in the digital arts. And this would have been back in 2003, maybe. So this was kind of new back then. And this class was in the north of England. And we realized that I was going to take a gap year anyway between high school and college. But we realized that it would be better for me to take that gap year to work, save up money for driving lessons so I could get my lessons, and then buy a car, because the college was in a small village, nothing was close by, my family nothing was close by, so I would just have to have a car. So I applied to this college. In England, it was 6 colleges you could apply to for the one cost through their government or whatever program. You just kind of apply for 6 colleges. And I got into all of them, I believe, including the one I really wanted to get into. So I was like, yay, I'm going there, blah, 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 gap year, boom. And does anyone else feel like when they were maybe age 13 to 19, they felt absolutely invincible? When I was talking about, I'm going to learn to drive when I was 17, it seemed exciting. It seemed doable. It seemed like something I could manage. It seemed like something I wanted. I feel like everything when you're that age, right? You just feel like bulletproof. And that feeling has completely gone away. Just completely dropped away. Because what happened is, because that program was so new, it was in the digital arts in the early 2000s, there weren't enough applicants that year for the program to go ahead. So I got a letter saying, not an email because it was 2002, I got a letter saying, we're pulling this program for this year. You cannot attend, but you can go to any college that you were admitted to on that list of 6. They'll just let you in. They'll just find a space for you. So I picked a different college. It was in Brighton, which is a lot closer to London, and had buses and trains that go to and from London. So then I decided that year instead I would work still and save up money, but I was going to travel. So I ended up going to live in Shanghai for like 3 or 4 months that year, and I'll do an episode about that because that was nuts. And so I ended up not learning to drive, right, at this prime opportunity. Which I'm glad I didn't buy a car because I would have had to sell it because I moved to America. But it was the prime opportunity where I felt absolutely bulletproof. Like I could do anything, be anyone. And I didn't do it because I think that I was going to feel that way forever. That I just thought, I'm a badass and I'm going to be able to feel this way and do whatever I want with nothing standing in my way for the rest of my life. Oh, Emily. So this is what ended up happening. Went to college, was an exchange student in the US. That's how I met my husband. Again, go back and listen to some other episodes. And when I got to the US permanently 14 years ago, we were living in California, so didn't really need a car. Moved back to Florida, or moved to Florida. My husband moved back. That's where he's born and raised. In North Florida, and it was a nightmare. I mean, I resisted driving we were there for 5 years. I resisted it for about 4. I walked 90 minutes to work sometimes in the Florida heat, 90 minutes there and back. I would, just always walk. I don't think I ever took a bus in North Florida because they really were crappy. They really didn't go anywhere useful. But for 4 years, people would bring it up, right? My in-laws, people around me. So why don't you? Don't you think you should? I mean, what is it? Why aren't you? And I didn't know how to say. I wasn't diagnosed at the time, and I think if I was, I would have had more ammunition and known myself better. But I didn't know how to say, it's absolutely terrifying. and I don't know if I can do it. And I think when you're an adult and you say that to someone about, let's say, swimming, driving, things that people think are normal, right? Typical. When you say that you just don't think you can do it, that it feels traumatic, people just think, well, that's how it is for everybody. Everyone struggles when they drive. It's tough on everybody, right? And I just didn't have the words to communicate how horrible I felt like it was going to be. So we were there for about 4 years, and eventually, I knew I had to learn eventually living in America. I just knew I had to. And so my husband started teaching me to drive. Spoiler alert, didn't go well. Did go well because I did learn to drive. Didn't go well because it was probably hell for the two of us. I was so wound up and anxious and vibrating on another level the entire time. I mean, the first time we just went to a huge parking lot with no one there, and just letting my foot off the brake was an absolute ordeal. It was like, the Austin Powers movie where the guy gets run over by a steamroller from really far away. And he's going, no, no. And it's really far away and going really slowly. And they're going, get out of the way. That's what it was like for me. I was Austin Powers screaming, get out of the way, in a car rolling about 2 miles an hour towards a curb, like a sidewalk. It was insane. And my husband, bless him, he tries to be patient, but, we didn't know what we were dealing with back then. Neither of us knew why I was such a basket case. We just didn't know. And he looks at me as very capable, because I am, and thinks highly of me, which I love, and wants to see me do well, and knows I can do well. So I think to him, too, it was frustrating why I was just panicking and freaking out so much. He was like, you can do this. So this took months, right? It took months of going out together and arguing and just being panicked the entire time. I got ready for my driver's test. I did the written one, which was horrible, let me tell you. You do it on a computer. This is how I did it. It was on a computer at the DMV. You go in, and it's in a public room. Like, the room where everyone sits on the chairs waiting? You're just in there on a computer while everyone watches how you might fail the test or whatever. It was horrible. And I remember they asked me a question about the windscreen of the car, and I didn't know if they were talking about the front of the car or the back of the car. I mean, it's things like that, because I didn't grow up in a car. You could say certain things, and I'm like, wait, where is that on a car? I think I got that one wrong. I'm not sure. But I passed that one. So I passed the written test, and then I had to go and do my driving test. So I get there to the DMV. I probably drove because I was allowed to. I was with my husband, and so I drove there. And I remember pulling into the parking thing, and I think when I was a kid and thinking about American driving tests, I always thought you did it in a test car, like you didn't do the test in your own car, right? And so I'm going, oh, where shall I pull in? Where I'm like panicked because I'm pulling into the DMV. And my husband, and it says, there's certain spots to pull in if you're doing a driving test. And so I pick the easiest one and just pull into that one. And I go in there or I forget, I go in, she comes out, I don't know. We get in the car, driver's test begins. So I have to back out of the spot, and you have to back out because in America you drive on the right. You have to back out and back all the way into the right lane. And I kind of backed out into the left lane and was head on with traffic kind of thing, and then had to adjust real quick. So I'm in the parking lot, and we pull out of the parking lot because you have to cross a 2-lane road to get to their testing parking lot. So we cross the 2-lane road. I pull into the wrong turn lane. Bleh. We pull in, and it's this little parking thing with like a little road that you go on. And she tells me, hit 30, do this, do that. I've got to hit 30 and then slow down and take a corner. And I swear to God, it's like, as I go around the corner. And she's like, okay, stop. Yeah, stop. So stop the car, and then she wants me to do the backing up thing. You're supposed to be able to back up the car 15 or 30 feet, something like that, while you're looking over your shoulder. She has me do that, and the car is to say fishtailing would be dramatic, but it's not staying straight, right? Like, if we were on a real road, this is a problem. And then she goes, stop, you do not have good control of this vehicle. And I'm sitting there going, this is it, I've failed, right? Why are we even doing this? Continue onwards, I do my 3-point turn, nail it. I'm not sure what else there was after the other things I messed up, and then did my 3-point turn. Pull back out, have to cross the street again, and then she says, drive into one of these spots. One of them is a drive straight ahead, one is a turn. So I just drive straight ahead and park the freaking car. And she goes, they never smile, I get, just sitting there and just goes, okay, I'll meet you inside and we'll get you drawn up. And I'm going, oh, so I passed? And she goes, yeah. She didn't seem happy about it that I passed, but I'm guessing I just scraped through on the criteria or something, because she literally told me on the test I did not have good control of the vehicle. That being said, I get my license and I'm good to drive. So something I negated to tell you was a week after I got my driver's license in Florida, we were going on a 2-month trip around the Americas, so around North America, Canada, and Central America, and then we were moving to Oregon. So I had done it at the last possible time. We were donating a lot of our stuff in that week after, so I drove the car a couple of times to a donation site, the same route, back and forth, and I felt really confident and really like I had it, kind of thing. The thing I've realized now, though, is the car matters if I'm not familiar with the car and if I'm not familiar with the route. Like, I could send my husband on any route, like with me, and just say, hey, turn left, go this way, and he's like chilling, right? I'm freaking out if I don't know where I'm going. I have to be very familiar with the route. So we do this 2-month trip, move to Oregon. We bring the car, we drive the car there. My husband drives the entire way because from Florida to Oregon, bless him, because I just learned to drive and I can't drive on a freeway. So we drive across the country, get to Oregon, and because we're there in a new place, I don't feel comfortable driving this car, right? It's like starting all over again. It's really hard to explain this to people because it's not typical. For neurotypicals, I think, don't go through this. You don't drive to another state or another town or another city, and for the most part, you're like, okay, here's my GPS, here's where I'm going, got it, good, boom, 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 right? If you're a confident driver or you know how to drive, you're kind of comfortable just driving. And so I didn't drive at all in Oregon. I just couldn't bring myself to do it at first. And we'd gotten new jobs and just moved there, and it just seemed really stressful. Well, within 6 months of moving there, that car died. So we had to get a new car, which that's it. We went from a Toyota Camry to a Prius. So from, a normal gas guzzler car to a hybrid. But it was a totally different car. Different shape, different size. And I could never get around to actually driving it. I was just terrified. So I never drove it, right? Because then it was like going back. I'd have to have my husband in the car. We're learning to drive again. It was just, seemed like a nightmare. So I never drove. I didn't drive for 3.5 years. We moved back to Florida with this car. We drive the Prius back this time. And we moved back to South Florida this time, which is where we live now, and bought our house and everything. And I work about 40 to 50 blocks straight up the street from me. So I literally have to pull out onto my street, take a right turn onto a 4-lane road, and my office is off of that 4-lane road, a straight shot. And I still have not done that drive. It is terrifying. So I started out, we did a couple of loops around the block where I was, again, just a mess. And now I've started pulling the car into we don't have a garage, but into our backyard. We had a robbery from our car a few months ago. We don't have a garage, so we started putting it in the backyard behind our gate, and I've been pulling it back there. But the idea of driving has gotten less since I have been doing it more. And I really do think if anyone is out there struggling with this, it's familiarity for me. It really is familiarity. So when I drive around with my husband in the Prius, I say, okay, so how do you turn it on? What does this do? Where's the flick for this? Where's the indicator for that? Blah, blah, blah. because once I'm familiar with a car, it's my buddy. Same on a route. I couldn't just, like I said, we're going there and go there. I've got to do that trip a bunch of times as a passenger, clock it in my mind where we're going. Right turn here, left turn at that light. Okay. And then I could probably do it slowly on a morning where there's no one around and do that a couple of times. So I am slowly working up to that again and really struggling still. But I just want to say to people out there is hope. There is a way to move through this, and if you're in a place where you have to drive, you don't have to be able to drive everywhere, like I said, but it does make me anxious living in the US, right? This is why anyone outside the US, why you see in movies all the time that they drive to the hospital, because we don't have free healthcare. So if you call 911 and an ambulance comes to pick you up, right? That's thousands, could be tens of thousands of dollars for that trip. So a lot of people just drive their, spouse, whoever, to the hospital. We live within a few blocks of 2 hospitals. And if my husband had anything happen to him, what would I do? What could I do? I thought about this during the hurricane. If you go back to episode 3, I think, is about Hurricane Ian hitting Florida. What if my husband got injured and we had to escape really quickly in the car? And my husband had an injured arm or leg? What if he couldn't drive? These are important things. One of my last episodes was about getting pregnant and having a baby. What if I'm home alone with the baby and they have an emergency and we need to drive to the hospital and I cannot do that? It's these things that make me scared not to be able to drive. So for me and my family, I've decided that it's something I do want to do and must do for my sanity and my family's safety and security. But if you're freaking out about it, do what I'm saying. Get more familiar with the routes. Look at maps. Do the street view of the map. I do that all the time on Google, so you can see what kind of road it is. Does it pull out onto a 4-lane, onto a 2-lane? Is there a stop sign? Is there a light? All this kind of stuff. Is there a bump there? And I know it might sound like a lot to people, but it's what I need to feel safe and secure, so I'm happy to do it because that's what it does. So if you think that would help you, I really recommend it. As a passenger, I recommend getting the loop earplugs. I don't recommend it for driving because you should be really aware of your surroundings when you're driving. And I think it's also really important to be able to distinguish the difference between motion sickness and sensory overload. Because for years, I thought it was only motion sickness and couldn't understand why I couldn't get it to stop, or if I did this, why did it still come up? And it's because it was sensory overload of the physical, the mental, the emotional, the sound, the light, everything. So think about that. Think about things you can do. If you get motion sick a lot, think about maybe it's not motion sickness, okay? I hope that has helped you guys out there, because I know driving can be just an absolute palaver. So I hope that has helped you to kind of gain some perspective on what it's like for me and other people out there. And I hope you get some hope from this, that you feel like it can be done. And remember when you were 13 to, 19, that teenage time where you're given the independence before you realize what the world is really like. Remember, you were bulletproof. You were bulletproof, and you still are. You can do whatever you decide you want to do. You just have to adjust. But I'm telling you, if you want to do it, you can, and you will. If you want to reach out to me and discuss this, or talk about, just share what you're going through, reach out to me. on My Brain is a Wonderland Pod on TikTok and Instagram and Gmail. And I'll see you next time. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.